A very special thank you to the ever-expanding Epic Brobot Rocket Punch team. You guys truly are epic Brobots. Ivan, Grant, Con, Jack, RJ, Mr. Tweets, Matthias, Peter, Robert, Kelso, Kevin, Derek, Dom, Nick, Danny, John, and special welcomes to the new Epic Brobots, Andy Butcher, who asks that I pronounce his name Frankenstein, Philip Pylenfers, Jake Fowler, who joined us years back and has come so very far with us, and incredibly, our good mate Pete Hamann, who was our very first supporter, so he's really been especially epic. So much wow, thanks guys! Hey Brobots, happy weekend, build log time! Today I'm going to share with you how to sculpt and fix up figures using epoxy putty. We're going to do the elbow, a little bit on the hand, the wrist to make the thumbs up guy, and then also give him a very fancy neckerchief, shemagh, cravat. Cravat's the one we're looking for. Fancy cravat. Good news is also that I've got it under an hour for you this time, so it might be a bit of an easier watch. Okay, thumbs up and let's go. Okay, it's the last home stretch. We're going to, our thumbs up pilot is nice and solid now. He's all in position. We're going to do a little bit of repair and sculpting work with an epoxy putty. This one's one of my favorites, the quick type. I think the dry time is about 8 hours. You can get faster ones. I've got some from the hardware store before, they're down to 10 minutes, but I mean, you've got to be pretty brave to be getting all your work done in 10 minutes. So this is one of the ones I like best. Just hunt around. It's supposed to be, they have a smooth type as well. I can't notice a lot of difference. I usually go with this one. Lighter is to show you something scary that Yokoyama-san sensei has shown me a couple of times. I mostly go with water for keeping my tools free of putty. It works pretty well. Vaseline or other type lubricants work even better, but I never feel I need to go that far. So if I was doing some major sculpting, maybe dip in water, and that's why it's already so rusty, and which is my cut end. So I generally keep it 50-50. Sorry it's not visible guys, am I visible here? I try to keep them in similar quantities by just zipping across the top like this and cutting through both in one go. So it's a bit dodgy for me to cut backhanded for the camera, but y'all can see what I'm doing, right? Oh, a bit grippy, bit more water. There we go, nice and smooth. I think we're good. Now this putty is old because, you know, I bought too much at once. Unless you have logistical challenges, I wouldn't suggest doing it, because this one, the brown part, looks like it's been sweating a little. So I'm just going to make sure, I'm going to pull them apart now, because if I don't do it now, I may not be able to next time. Wear gloves if you've got sensitive skin. When I mixed up some nasty stuff from the hardware store, I did wear gloves. I've done this one a bunch of times and have not yet had an issue, so for speed, I'm going to go without gloves. One of the reasons I don't like using gloves when working with this is, the reason I'm being slow and having a really good look is sometimes, there it is, sometimes plastic, can you see that? Sometimes plastic hides on your putty and you don't want to find it after it's been mixed up. So I give it a good scour over to make sure I'm not mixing in chunks of coverage on the plastic. You know, I was 50-50 on doing full build logs in the future, but you guys were right. When people asked me, they said, do some more like this. I wasn't sure that I would have enough things to share and talk about, but over the course of just even making this first build log video, I feel like I've got lots of cool things out. Even my wife said to me, you know, you've mentioned a lot of cool things. So thank you. Thank you for pushing me to become a better version of myself, guys. I mean that. I sincerely appreciate that. I would not have thought to do this. You know, Tobey Maguire moment. You complete me. You're helping to make me a better artist and modeler by sharing what I know. This is a little stiff. It's a little cool here this morning. So One of the things Kow Yokoyama sensei always provides is, check this out. As stupid as it looks, it really does work. I think a bunch of the guys used to be really heavy smokers back in the 80s, so they always had these handy, and I figured that they were always getting uses for them. We've got this, none of us smoke, but we've got a kid who needs birthday candles. So this is the lighter for Tab's birthday candles, and I can borrow it for stuff like this. So I saw Yokoyama-san once doing this, and I was like, dude, what are you doing? But just be really careful not to burn yourself. But you can see how that really softened up, and it helps it mix faster. And according to Yokoyama sensei, it should cure a little faster. I don't have any actual data on that. I've never tested it, but I do know it sure makes mixing it up easier. So, and if Yokoyama-san does something and I see it, he's never led me wrong. It's always cool and better. So it kind of gives me a cool memory of working together with him too. As you guys have probably noticed, somebody mentioned it in the YouTube video. They said, you really like this guy's work. And I do. He's, he's a really good guy, and really showed me so many cool things for modeling. So, I have all the time in the world and respect for the man. There we go. Let's just make sure the color. It's such a sick beige too, isn't it? This is a Mr. Tweets beige. Tweets could sculpt a whole Macross kit out of this color and be happy with it. What do you think, Tweets? This Tamiya was made for you, mate. Alrighty. Almost there. I should probably not talk during this so that I could speed it up. Otherwise you have to watch me knead putty in real time with my babble. Okay, how are we looking for color? Just make sure there's no marbling in it. It looks pretty good. And once you've done this a handful of times, you'll know this beigey baby poo yellow that comes out, and you'll know that you're good to go. Cool. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. And what I usually do is set it aside for 30 minutes because it's a real pain to work with at first because it's super sticky. But I want to get into this. So, impatience wins. Another thing I like to do is put a bit of water down on my surface here just so it doesn't stick. So one of the first things I wanted to do is, don't you love the sculpt of this? It really does look like a brain bucket, doesn't it? Is I wanted to fill this up so that I can position the words come to me now. I want to fill this up so it's very easy to position the helmet on the neck there, and it can still be removable because I want to paint it separately and with different paints to give it a very different different look. That will become evident in the paint section. How are we looking? I want to slightly overfill it. Just so that it can squeeze back down through the neck. There, let's give it a test. How are we looking? Cool. Yep, that's probably good. Just pull that off the outside. Let's use a tool. It's got these, I think they're called dental tools. They actually sold them in the hobby shop. I got them from Yodobashi Camera, I'm pretty sure. And sculpting tools. Just take the excess off. I've probably overfilled it a little too much. But better than not enough, then it's a real pain. As that hardens up, I can probably scooch this back a little easier. But for video purposes, let's get into it. Now, I do want to sculpt a little bit of a neck on there. I'll come back after I've got the helmet sorted. And okay, almost there. Make sure we're all lined up. This is a slightly different version of the squeeze, and this will get rid of that god awful seam line all in one go. Hopefully. Cool, there we go. Now, 101 with sculpting and resculpting these things is sausages. Yep, you heard me. Sausages. Let's reform all of these. And I kid you not, this is how I think and joke to myself when I'm making it, is you want various putty sausages. It's all about sausages. And that's all I do. I roll them up like this, and we can lay them into position by figuring out the volume we need. You can do it in one chunk, but I just find that's a little bit more difficult. So I like to work with smaller volumes like this and gradually move them into place to tailor make my the volume required. So for the first one, I'll use one of these longer ones, and can you see in there the elbow inside? Yeah. And we place it, say, inside there. Yeah, it's very hard to show, isn't it? Can you see in there? What I'll do is, I'll put it on top, like this. We can see that. And then, disposable tools. I'm going to use a toothpick and wet it. And I use these to push it into position. That we can see, right? Yep. And it has the added benefit of adding appropriate detail as we work. When you look at that, it already looks like a fold in the fabric, doesn't it? It won't stay because we need to fix the volume first, but just as an example. Now this is exactly the same technique I use on the suits. In fact, that's where I learnt it. Machine Krieg is a fantastic property like that. You learn so many different, cross-training things that are so useful for other aspects of modeling. I'll push this in, get it to seat inside, good. And it will probably require one more on the back there. Yes, so I'm looking for about this much volume. Maybe a little more. Let's put one in here. And the other one here on top of that. Cool. We can see. And then keeping the tool wet all the time. Some artists, some sculptors that I know, that they have told me that they use saliva for this. I don't, but it's readily available, right? And apparently the stickiness of it works well for keeping tools moist for a longer time. I just don't want to do it. I'm desperate, I'm keen, but not that far. Okay, now you can see we've got ample on here. Now what I'll do is work it in. Even though it's got good texture, one of the things I do, if it's looking too fat like that and I feel that it hasn't filled in, is I'll manually squeeze it in like that. Because it's important we get it all the way in to make sure the joint is bomber. We want the models to last a fair while, and mine get, dragged around, taken to shows, etc. Last thing you want is, this guy's got one job. Put your thumb up, bro. Look cool in the cockpit. We don't want him coming apart. That would be quite the fail. Okay, let's start positioning it. Now don't freak out. It's hard because the putty keeps moving, you touch it, it comes out. It's all par for the course. Especially if you start working against time on your own, you'll because we want a little bit of extra here, like, and I use the point here to push in on elbow and knee type areas. I think we might be moving with a little bit too much volume. Might be a little bit too fat. So I'll start moving it down and around and slicing off a little bit until I get the appropriate volume. It can take a little bit of time. You can see this is why we need a little bit of a longer lasting putty. 10 minutes just would not do it. I'll start taking off some that we don't need. Starting to look quite elbow-like. Might be a little bit too much there. Now I need a sharp blade to take a little bit of this off the top. There we go. Just the volume adjustment's important. We could always go, you know, that 1960s really puffy pirate sleeve look, like from Lost in Space. But it would need to be consistent all around the figure, so I do like that look. I think it looks pretty nifty, but it needs to be consistent. You'll sometimes see it. Somebody new who will do a really big puffy sleeve. It's cute, but not quite right. Okay, come on, a little bit of volume off here. Just a little bit out. There we go. So this is what I'm basically doing. I'm putting it into position, getting a basic sculpt in, eyeballing the volume, and then fixing it up. Okay, I think we're looking pretty good for volume here. So I'll go for one more run, rolling pin some of it in. And then finally start getting the smoothness and go for a final sculpt. Should be close. Fingerprints become pretty obvious at this stage. Don't freak out. They are actually easy to smooth over once you've got everything else figured. Yep, volume-wise, that's looking pretty good. It's nicely in place. Almost looks like a bandage now, doesn't it? That's something to think about for the future. Okay, volume done. Let's go back to the sculpt. I want the elbow crease come on, fix in there. There we go. Elbow crease in the middle. Let's place it here. And pinch it up into the middle here. And same on the inside here. This will be difficult to see, but just understand I've done it on the opposite side there. Cool. And rolling in from the outside as the cloth would do. And same here. So pushing this around, we've ended up with a little bit more on the back. It's okay. Squeeze up into place. Now, after those initial folds are put in, it looks very harsh and symmetrical, which we don't want on cloth. Cloth is inherently unstable, we could say, right? So let's squeeze it down a little bit in a few places, just to give it some additional life. Cool. It's actually starting to look okay. I think I might form up bottom of the elbow there a little. There we go. Cool. Actually, that's come together really well right at the end. Start loose, finish tight. Sounds like something some guy would say. Okay, final step. I'm going to clean up this section just really quick while it's nice and soft with some an alcohol-based thinner. You could use denatured alcohol, anything you want really. I use one of these because, it's handy. I don't use a great volume of it, so, it's okay. You don't need much. And with the soft, so the reason is, my basic understanding of it is that alcohol tends to melt these epoxy putties a little bit. Somebody might be able to help us out with an explain. But it just works better than water, and I use this final step to smooth it out and get rid of fingerprints. And you can already see there on the elbow, it's taking away some of that roughness. And it's to get rid of the fingerprints, or at least blend the fingerprints back to a point where they appear as detail rather than something that you can use to carbon date this in the future and say, hey, that Linc idiot made it. There we go. That should be enough. It's not hyper detailed, but I think that looks good enough. Yeah, I'm just going to reshape a little bit of this part up here. I think that should be a little bit further in there. That looks pretty good, yeah. Make sure that it blends with the original detail still showing on the kit. Here we go. And yeah, that looks good to me. Of course, when we prime it, I'll be mortified. But we're looking pretty good. Okay, now for the other parts, this video is probably already hyper long. This was the most difficult part, so I've shown you that. I'll be basically just doing a micro version of it for the hand and putting a little bit up in here as well. And then that will be it. This one is very simple. It'll just be a small sausage put in there and blended back around the fist. I mean, it's dead easy compared to that. That's the real shooting match today. So I'm going to leave this here. I'll take some photos in the morning once it's dried up, and I'll show you how it looks. I will actually be back a little bit with the helmet. Sorry, I spoke too soon. Following up on the sculpting for here, we're all set. It's had a day to dry and cure. Today we're going to start on cleanup. Now it's deceptively long process here. We've got quite a few steps to do. Need to clean back the putty, set up the helmet so that it sits correctly, and there's still quite a few seam lines to fix up here. These are some of the basic tools that I'm going to work with today. First things for the helmet, I've got some of these arrayed out. Excuse me, sorry. I've been speaking Japanese all morning, guys. They're from this set, the Kamiyasu God Hand 3mm set. They come in a couple of thicknesses. These seem to be like pretty much the standard ones. What I'm really liking these for is that they're ever so slightly compressible. So when you're pushing them onto rounded surfaces, they slightly flex around them, so you don't suffer with, if you hit it with something hard and straight, it is bevel the correct word? I'm not sure, but you know what I mean. It cuts down into it and makes a straight edge, which we want sometimes. But for the rounded surfaces like this, and on a lot of Save the Machine and Krieger kits, we do want the rounded one. So I'm really liking these from Guide Hand, the Kamiyasu. I think they're calling it Kami is the character for God, or spirit really. Spirit would actually be a better translation. And Yas would be for Yasuri, I'm imagining, which is to file or sand. So the spirit files, spirit fingers.
ちょっともうちょっと。
もう一回。
待って。いいよ。
Ready? Spirit fingers. The look on Tomoe's face is priceless. She couldn't think less of me now. All right, back to work. And we back in here. Other things I've got set out, even though I've got the one here, I dug this out. This popped out, and it's one of my my holders, and it's from Japan. Check it out. Yeah, it's from Tokyo Hands, the 60mm cube cycle. I always like the word saikoro for cycle or steak. It means cubed steak chunks. Legitimate 262 yen. Wow, right? And so what I'm going to do is, I got all nostalgic for a sec there. And what I remember is that's got a 2mm hole in it. So I've got some of these brass ones. I'll probably be using this kind of thing a fair bit from now on that I've found it. I'll be placing 2mm in there, fixing it up onto that guy. And yeah, that's what we've got to get on with it. So let's get going. Get to work, Linc. Alrighty. To get some of the volume down, I was a little bit heavy-handed in spots here. I'm going to just go with the X-Acto knife. There's one thing I wanted to give you a heads up on, something that I've made a mistake of in the past. In my urgency, I've flown into some of this stuff with the files before, and what happened was it will rip the... I mean, you can get away with it if you're good and lucky, but I'm neither good nor lucky, so how do I say it? The many times that I've ruined this, because it's not just a couple, every now and then I go, nah, this will be the time that I'll make it. And I think it's just the friction, and because you're pushing hard and all of that, it pulls it out. And for the small amount of time that something like this can save you, I don't feel that it's worth it overall because of the curing time. I mean, then you got to mix up another batch of putty and sculpt it into place, go through all of that again. It's this is one of the times that I do feel that haste is not the way to go. But for stuff like this, you can see, for stuff like this, the knife is perfect because this is just in the way. So I'll carefully scoop that out with the knife. Please be really careful, guys. I've noticed our Paint on Plastic Facebook group is pretty good. We don't seem to have a lot of the epic fail of people chopping themselves up with hobby knives, which is really good. It's such a waste to do that because you just lose a lot of time. Boom, there we go. Just want that nice and clean so that it sits. Okay, that one maybe at the back here a little. I just want to be very careful. I don't want it to pop out. Although, you'll often hear me refer to the back of the model. I don't know if that translates normally into English. I don't know if English speakers use that term a lot. I imagine we do though, just it sounds pretty universal. But when you hear me talk about the back of the model, it doesn't always mean gosh, how do I say that? It doesn't mean the actual back, like this is the front, that's the back. The back, when we talked about it in the studio, tended to be the part that wouldn't be facing the camera. The camera would designate what was the front and what was the back. And depending on what we wanted to show on the model, let's let the car go past. Depending on what we really wanted to show, our purpose for the model, because they weren't always standalone models, a lot of times they're built for a purpose, to show something in particular. We would then refer to it as the back. So what that means to me is, for this helmet, the this section here because the primary shot, because in reality, this Falke project is for video and photographs of the ultimate product that comes out of this. Even though it's, we're working on a plastic model. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that correctly, but if you guys know what I mean, the actual product that I end up selling then is the photograph and the video. So the principal shot I want for this guy is from here. So this is the front, and then that's the back. I hope that was clear. I quite liked hearing about that concept. I remember when I was getting started with professional work. I'm not sure how that translates for hobbyists exactly, but I mean, you could even think about it in terms of how you display models on your shelf. Unless you're constantly fiddling with them, chances are you're going to have a front and a back for every model too. Cool, right? I'm not saying don't paint the back, but dude, sometimes I would see that happen. In fact, even, here we go, we're almost there. I even saw a funny little story about the Gaia Notes team were having a little, it wasn't a complaint. It was more of just a funny realization from them. They had a Gunpla model that was painted and weathered by Balki-san. And when they flexed the joints, inside the joints where it wasn't going to be visible was not painted or weathered. And they were shocked. They were aghast with this. And I just kind of smiled to myself. I didn't want to say it and try to get into this big long explanation, but I said, well, yeah, obviously he considers that the back. See, if I had lit into that story first, it wouldn't have made sense, but because I explained the back, it made perfect sense, didn't it? It's almost like I've got a point to my stories. Check my wife's face. No. You've heard so many of those silly stories, you just don't care now, do you, Tomoe? You're not even listening, are you? Oh, that's gold. You're focused on. See, she's very proper. Tomoe wants to get it all in shot. She's very, very proper. Okay, next I'm going to get a little bit of water to wet my sponges and keep going with this. All right, let's prepare some short lengths with the guide hand tools Kamiyasu. And I've got them lined up. I'm going to go for about 10 millimeters. I could probably go thinner, but I don't want them too small either, and I tend to reuse them. I don't cut them just for one project. I don't want to go through them too quickly, so I'm just going to carefully slice across here. They don't need to be the same length. I'm just doing this for just to work quickly, speed and efficiency. Let's make sure they're all popped off. Yep. And I'll just carefully work down some of this. I'll try to keep the stories to a minimum so I don't drag this poor video out too long. But got that. It's a bit chunky on top, so starting off with the 120 grit. Not too much pressure. I don't want this to pull out the I really left too much on, but it's okay, just gently work it down. Again, as much saying it to myself as to trying to give you guys a heads up. Don't work too hard, don't push too hard on this, it's too easy to pull putty out. And this stuff tends to, there's a bit of friction there. Something like Tamiya Basic Putty just smooths down. Even if you work it very hard, its grip is phenomenal, right? But this stuff will just pop out. There we go. Cool. There's a little bit of, I can see some, not inconsistency, but I can see some difference in the levels of the plastic there, which this will also solve. Okay, fast forward this section, Linc. Going with a circular motion. Nice, gentle, even pressure. Alrighty, we've worked down with the 120. Next up, pink is 240. And I'm just going to gently clean up. You can see there's a little bit of damage. You might not be able to see it. It's very fine. There's a little bit of damage from the kamias. I just wanted to take this this point to mention it because, you know, when I was a young bloke, I didn't kind of think about this. I'd spend a lot of time. I'd ask, what sandpaper did you use? 400, and then I'd do all of the work in 400. But unless somebody has pointed this out to you, it is faster and a little bit easier to use the rougher grades for the majority of the work and then start smoothing the finish then with the finer grades. I know for a lot of you that's very common sense, but it wasn't for me for a short time. And then when I figured it out, I was like, oh, okay. So just in passing, I thought I want to make mention of that. If that helps one person, mission accomplished. You can still feel this is quite rough. It's a nice circular, like almost a polishing motion. We just need to get the work marks out of the plastic. Not too much needed at all. And then the good thing is this piece then becomes so this is like a very fine, this is a very coarse grade, excuse me, for something like Gunpla. As we change the scale, the effects that our various grades of sanding products have also changes. Cool. And continuing on, we'll go for 400 is probably as high as we need to go. We want a little bit of coarseness. Maschinen Krieger benefits from a little bit of roughness. It's quite a visceral genre, if that makes sense. There's, you know, based on the guy making it, he's not a soft sort of gentle guy. You know, he does everything at 100 miles an hour. Okay, it's visible, so I get nervous at it. You guys get nervous too when you can still see the notions of the seam line underneath. I don't know if that's smooth or not, so I may actually give this a little bit of a test with a surfacer through a can just to double check. That's looking nice and smooth now. What I might do is, cool, that's looking pretty good. What I might do next, rather than go through all the grades, I might give it a bit of a polish with an emery board. That's looking pretty good. It's a little bit left on top there. The water. Keep that dust down. A little bit on top there. For good and for bad, the putty being the same color as the plastic. So I've noticed there's a lot of products coming out that are like black cement, black, you know, like that other Senchakuzai. The other glue that I've got is even called black, and it's because it's a very rarely used sprue color. I haven't changed the shape of this too much, but yeah, we're looking pretty smooth, pretty good. Cool. Give a buff with an emery board next. That'll buff out. Okay, be right back. Okay, let's buff it out with, this is a Daiso emery board. They're pretty cheap, good price performance. Pretty sure, yeah, it goes pink, white, then grey. I'll fast forward this one. But yeah, that's turning out great. It's buffed it back nicely. Okay, cool. Lastly, I'm going to set this up for a bit of a spray test. Just to make sure my seams are all clean. I'll put a bit of a starter dot in the middle. That's the epoxy putty from before. Go with 1 mil. sure the axis is good. We want him looking about this angle. Yep, like that. Gentle, even pressure so we don't zing it off into our finger. So the good thing about the epoxy putty like this is I can get a reasonable amount of depth for safety. So just testing it out, put my nail against it, and then when I pull off, okay, it looks like about 6 mil of depth. Should be plenty. Do you guys remember the Blue's Clues moment from the last one? Where's that little brass rod piece? Think, think, think. Tell me you didn't watch that when you were a kid. I watched it when I was a grown-up. It's so cool. I think Tomoya found it one day. She said, Linc, watch this. This guy's great. It was Steve, wasn't it? Steve. Sit in your chair and stink, stink. Okay, we're good. Let's give this guy a bit of a test and see how our seam work has turned out. Thanks. Getting closer. I've got a little bit of this. The can's pretty old and funky, so it didn't come out very well. So I put that to like B-roll use. I won't use it on something that I need a smooth surface for. But just as a check on this, it's looking very nice. It's quite smooth, the seam lines are all fixed up. Now, the last major thing we need to do is this has got a pretty nasty seam line down the side of the pants. Here's what it looks like before. Is the light catching it? Yeah. And here's what it looks like, to my mind, being repaired. I mean, seam lines comes from, I don't know if it's the original meaning of the word, but trousers are supposed to have a seam line. So making these seamless would be quite the ordeal. So what I've done, I'll show you how I did it. I was going to explain it, but it's better if I show you. Simple. Step one is to carve down the extra plastic. If it's too thick, it won't look quite right. It's very simple. X-Acto blade in, and let's carve it down. I was hoping we might get a couple of holes here, because we could actually paint that as a faux tear in the fabric. In the painting stage, which is kind of nifty. Yep, I'm serious. I will actually do that. Another thing to keep in mind is, although I've gone to a little bit of trouble on this, it's more of as a learning exercise for us and to share with you. This figure is largely hidden. We won't see much of this in the finish. This is, let me go past. I'm now committing one of my the things that I call a little sin, in that I'm building for the work in progress. If I was building this to show or demonstrate the model, I might not even paint him from there down, or it would be quite quick and dirty. I'm serious, because most of this will not be seen. And you guys watch. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I've got to be careful. Whenever I share things that go against the commonly accepted norms, sometimes get a little bit of pushback. But now you watch. Many of the Falke projects you'll see on interwebs, people will spend an inordinate amount of time on the office, the cockpit, even though it's nigh invisible once the machine is finished. Again, that's fine if that's your thing. By all means, do that. But what I have noticed is I see a lot of highly detailed cockpits, and then they kind of run out of steam on the project, which is, the actual Falke is the hero. So round, it's not round. Where's the round one? The hero of this project is meant to be the Falke, and the little figure is mainly for scaling it and give it a sense of direction and purpose. But you'll see what I mean. Just keep that in mind because we'll probably see a bunch of Falke projects kick off. Some people get really excited about the cockpit, but it's almost like the Falke is an educational piece from Yokoyama sensei, saying, don't do that. Okay, I think that's mostly, it's quite trim now. Maybe a little bit more off here. On the top part of the overpants, it doesn't quite match up as it does with the lower leg. And I do plan to paint that ever so slightly different color. But mostly like that. And then smooth out a little bit of these so that it has the right drape for the folds. Yep, that's looking pretty cool. I'll minimize it at the bottom of the leg. Just make it a little thinner and tighter. Scale appropriate. No, really, bottom of the legs probably should be a little tighter. And then using one of your cheaper thin cements. Yep, we're looking pretty good. And using a cheap thin cement. Again, I'm using this one. I have it. The ultra tippy one. Carefully weld the seam line down. And that helps to flatten it, help it to blend a little bit better so it doesn't obviously look like it's been carved with a knife. And we're looking pretty good. So he's going to sit in our cockpit like this. And again, even placing it down there, you can see those seam lines disappear very quickly, and it would be quite the job. Now, one cool little detail now to share. Can you see the gap there in the neck? Now we could fix that by sculpting him a neck, or a very simple one that I learned from Yokoyama-san is to give him a scarf or cravat. I'm going to work on that next. One of the things you'll notice as you put your suit pilot together is that because of the way the collar is, it's not a fold down soft fabric collar, so there will be a gap. No matter how you make it, there will be a little bit of a gap there. You can squeeze it on, but we want this to be a prop for photography. And a little memory popped into my monkey brain. I remember talking about this with Kow Yokoyama sensei, like 10 years ago. And so I dug this out and highly recommend this one. It's good, but there's no English in it. And there's a photo in here that reminded me of what I wanted to do. Down here, Sensei's pilot, if you look very closely, you can see that he's modeled a cravat in place. I mean, we could sculpt a neck, but that's quite difficult. Molding like a cravat, a shemagh, a scarf of some form is very fast and very easy. So let's do that. Good one. Okay, I've mixed up some epoxy putty. Now, Yokoyama-san would probably go with the 10-minute one. He has no fear, that guy. Okay, let's get our sausage of putty ready. Might be a little bit too much. And fill up the triangular void we've got in front there. Okay, trusty toothpicks in action once again, the ultimate sculpting tool. I'm just going to form it into the neck here. Now I could have put a little bit of a lubricant on the neck to stop it from completely, sticking in there. But what I'll do is I'll let it harden up a little. And this already looks exactly like Yokoyama-san's version. What do you think, Tomoe? We just need the ruffles. There we go. So poke the hole, squash it a little to make it look like a ruffled fabric with some drape. Oh, actually it looks like, I don't know if it's called the same. I believe the British and the Aussies may call it the same thing. There's one called either camo cloth. The Aussies called it scrim. I still don't know why. As a kid, it was one of those things I didn't want to say, what's scrim? It sounds stupid. But that's exactly what that looks like now. Seal it in there a little. I'm going to put an ultra small amount around the back of the neck there. Sausage it in. A bit thicker. Yep. stretch it out a little. I think we'll go with about that much. Yeah, and then it has to stick together, of course. Boom. Tweeze that into place. So much for the sausage. Come on, Linc, you're being all sausage fingered. There we go. Lovely. So the helmet, the hole is still in place. And let's sculpt that back into here. Let's go with the better point, that one. Cool. Gosh, that was easy. Yeah, looks perfect. Let's get my close-up glasses on. I think we're rock and roll here. That looks really, really good. Should I leave some neck visible, or is that helmet? You know, I'm liking this stuff so much. I'm going to put some more in. So he's got it cinched up tight up under his neck there. And that will save me breaking out any flesh tone paints. I'm not going to say it's all about saving work, but it's all about saving work. We don't need a flesh tone on this, so... we need a pinch more putty. Bit more volume too. There we go. Sorry guys, I'm just going to drop it into place there on the neck. It's getting pretty sticky, so I've got to make sure not to stick it to my fingers. There we go, camo knitting. And then crush it down just a tad. That looks awesome. Okay, before it sticks. Yep, that's cool. How do we look? Now I'm going to let that dry. I don't want to mess with it anymore, and I'll come back and show you after we're done. Cool. Okay, now with a quick prime, it looks like this. I've gone with a black base and then added some white in to make this kind of, custom neutral gray, and that will be part of the next video I'll share with you. And it's looking really good. I'm very happy with this one. It might be a tad overworked for what we want, but it's looking really good. Okay, thanks a bunch as always, guys. Happy weekends and talk soon. Bye. See ya. Big thanks to Hobbyco and Little Robot for their support and for bringing us the best brands and live events from Japan. Support local. And of course, the Brobot Inner Circle, the awesome folks that make this happen. I couldn't do it without you. Always, thank you so very much.